In this video, I'm going to rank every single boss assault rifle in Fortnite history from worst to best. This is every single assault rifle that is exclusively obtained through killing a boss, right? So that means, yes, while the enhanced hollow twister could be obtained through the Shogun X boss, it also could be obtained by the train in a separate season, so it won't be on this list. Do make a note here, though, that there's no RG or Brutus's minigun or any of the boss drum guns on this list. The wiki does define them as assault rifles, but I'm keeping them off this list for obvious reasons, right? A minigun is an LMG, and drum guns are SMGs. Also, Spire Guardian's Primal AR was available in creative only and not BR, so it won't be on this list. But with all that out of the way, guys, be sure to leave this video a like if you go on to enjoy it, and let's get into this ranking. This is a good one. At number 20 today, in dead last, and it wasn't even close, it is Montague's Modular Nemesis AR from Chapter 5. I absolutely despise this weapon. I think it was the worst mythic by far in Chapter 5 Season 1. When you've got a season with a Reaper Sniper Rifle, with Nisha's Striker AR, with the Thunderburst SMG, who is possibly ever going to take this weapon in any type of ranged fight, right? In my opinion, it's actually more of a DMR than it is an assault rifle. Just not a desirable weapon for me. I am a Nemesis hater till the day I die, and it will remain in last place on this list today. At number 19 is Highcard and Heart's Havoc Suppressed Assault Rifle. Yeah, they are exactly the same. I don't even know why these two weapons exist separately. This is a weapon that I can never get around to liking. I've tried it over and over again. I've tried it in Reload. I tried it back in Chapter 4, and I just could not get myself to enjoy the Havoc Suppressed Assault Rifle. I just felt like I was shooting marshmallows at people. It can be accurate. It's also suppressed, so I do see why people like this weapon, but it was just never for me. I always felt like it was way too weak, and that is why it's at the bottom of this list today. At number 18 is going to be the Enhanced Fury AR, and you might not remember this thing ever being in the game. That's because it barely was. It could be dropped by a wandering Shogun X. And it's alright, right? I think its only problem is that it was in Chapter 6 Season 1, and yeah, we all know in Chapter 6 Season 1, the Hollow Twister AR absolutely dominated the assault rifle meta, and honestly, the Fury didn't really get any true usage until Chapter 6 Season 3, and even at that, people were still taking the Spire rifle, so I think the Fury assault rifle is one of those assault rifles that will forever go forgotten about once it is vaulted, like once we're into Chapter 7. I've always thought it's just a painfully mid assault rifle. And number 17 is Huntmaster Saber's Thermal AR, and you want to talk about painfully mid. Yeah, this thing is that, and I will say it is a huge upgrade over the Chapter 1 version of the thermal scoped AR. You get a new scope, you get a much better fire rate, but slightly less damage. It is a totally okay weapon, but you gotta remember, we are talking about literally the best assault rifles of all time, and could Huntmaster Sabers go any higher? Honestly, I don't think so. I think this weapon is better than how it's placing on this list today. Like in other lists, you'll find this weapon maybe placing a little bit higher, but for now, again, we're going against the best assault rifles of all time. This weapon doesn't stand a chance. And it's honestly the same exact thing for Ares Warforged AR at the number 16 spot. This is not a bad weapon. In fact, it's got a pretty high DPS, of course, with Chapter 5 assault rifles that are all projectile. The DPS numbers are a little bit inflated because obviously DPS banks on you hitting every single shot. That is why it is how much damage you can do in a second. And with projectile weapons, that doesn't happen too often, right? Because, you know, they're projectile weapons. They're not hit scan weapons. They're not easy to use. And I try to take that into account when talking about Chapter 5 weapons on this list. But again, this weapon is not placing as high because it is literally on a list with some of the best ARs we have ever seen. So again, I don't think it's terrible, but it's just not good enough to be any higher. It doesn't do anything like crazy well. And again, another assault rifle in that same kind of mid category is Relic's MK Alpha assault rifle, right? I feel like every assault rifle above this weapon on this list today is pretty dang good. This weapon to me is just a worse version of the MK7, right? That is what it is. I truthfully don't even know why it exists, right? Like just nerf the MK if you want to do that, but instead they add this weapon, which gives a slower fire rate, less recoil, more damage. I think 99% of players just prefer the regular MK7 over the MK Alpha. I don't think that's a hot take, and so that's why it's kind of in the midpoint of this list. At number 14, and this might be a surprise to some of you guys, it is Ocean's Burst Assault Rifle. I'm telling you, Ocean's Burst Assault Rifle being at number 14, that goes to show how absolutely stacked this list is. This is one of the hardest lists I have ever had to make, and unfortunately, Ocean's Burst AR just kind of got the wrong end of the stick. Like I said, any weapon that I mentioned from here on out, I think you could easily put inside like the top 6, top 7 assault rifles of all time. Unfortunately, the thing with Ocean's Burst AR is just we have seen a lot of really good burst ARs that we'll talk about higher up on this list, and so So that's why this weapon, in my opinion, on this list today is the worst out of all of them. At number 13 is going to be Meowdus's Piao Piao rifle with a DPS of 165. Remember, this is different than Meowscles' version from Chapter 2, Season 2. I don't really know why they have different stats, but it basically functions the exact same. You've got a slow fire rate, a good amount of bloom if you don't tap fire, but you are getting huge damage for a fully automatic assault rifle. I think this is actually an underrated AR. But the thing is, right, especially in remakes, you've got to think there are just so many really, really good weapons in that season to take. I mean, you had some of the best mythics of all time in that season, so were you going to take this one? Probably not. And I think that all holds true for my number 12 spot, which is going to be Meowscles' rifle, right? This is the exact same weapon, but with a DPS of 187, which is better than 165, of course. And it's the same thing, right? In Chapter 2, Season 2, were you necessarily going to take this weapon over Brutus's minigun, over Midas's drum gun, over Sky's AR? I wasn't personally. But if I see it on the ground in reload or something, yeah, of course I'm going to take this thing. This thing can be a bully at certain ranges. If you know how to use it, this thing can delete people. Our number 11 is going to be Sloan's Pulse Rifle. This is the mythic version of the Pulse Rifle, and you guys know what you're getting with this weapon. Huge, huge damage, great first shot accuracy, fully auto from the hip, of course, but just a terribly slow fire rate. You know, it's like if you miss a couple of shots, you're probably going to be screwed. But all it takes is 2 body shots, and there goes somebody's shield. And honestly, I think this weapon is better than the Stark Industries rifle because that weapon has come back in Chapter 5. You've got to deal with the projectile version of that weapon. This weapon has always fully remained hit scan. It's just a really good assault rifle. And again, the fact that it is outside the top 10 on this list, guys, the top 10 is going to be a bunch of absolute bruisers. And to start off the top 10, we've got Sloan's Striker Burst AR from Chapter 3, Season 2, okay? This is the version of the Striker Burst where it's got the, you know, red dot sight, and it's just a great weapon, right? Overall, I don't have anything really to complain about. You know what you're getting with a burst assault rifle, a slow fire rate. You know, this weapon's got a little bit more vertical kick, but you're getting great body shot damage at 35 damage a shot, and it's a 2-round burst. This was the go-to weapon in zero builds in those early, you know, Chapter 3, Season 2 era. It's just a good weapon. I don't really have any complaints about it. But if I had to pick, I'm going with the Enhanced Spire Rifle at the number 9 spot today, guys. Okay, so this weapon, as you know, was just in Chapter 6, Season 3, could be obtained from Daigo when you kill him. I think the Spire Rifle is going to go down as one of the most underrated assault rifles of all time, and I don't know when we're going to see it again. It feels like it was themed perfectly for Chapter 6, Season 3 exclusively. The only thing it, like, really lacks in is fire rate, okay, I guess, but also the reload speed being, like, 5 whole seconds is absurd. The thing is, you don't really ever have to reload this thing because in the Mythic version, I mean, you're getting 50, 55, 60 bullets before you have to reload. Great accuracy. I love the Spire Rifle. I will say, I think it benefited a lot from being in a assault rifle meta in Chapter 6, Season 3 that didn't have any scoped ARs. With that being said, I think if this thing were to stay in Chapter 6, if it were in Chapter 6, Season 4 right now, it would by far be the best AR in the game. Moving on to number 8, that is Sloan's Burst Assault Rifle, okay? This is the one from Chapter 2, Season 8 that does not have a scope on it, but it does have a little bit of extra zoom to it. It's basically the same thing as Ocean's Burst AR, except this weapon only has 21 bullets, whereas Ocean's has 30, but this weapon has a DPS of about 40 DPS higher. That is insane for a burst assault rifle, right? Like, you are looking at huge damage, great accuracy. If you land a singular headshot, you can crack somebody's shield in a singular burst. I love this weapon, and honestly, it's one of the few examples where I would rather take the non-scoped version, this weapon, over the scoped version. That's the Striker Burst from Chapter 3, Season 2. Of course, though, please let me know your thoughts on that in the comment section down below. At number 7 is going to be the Herald's Burst Assault Rifle. This thing is absolutely unbelievable, and I wasn't lying when I said that this list was stacked with some unbelievable burst ARs. A DPS of 200 for this weapon is unbelievable. A burst assault rifle should not have a DPS of 200, but that means that essentially with a singular trigger pull, you can actually do 200 damage to somebody. Of course, that's best case scenario. That's never really going to happen, but that just goes to show the true power of this weapon. Absolutely melts wood builds, especially. You can literally one burst wood builds. Bullets will leak through the builds and hit your opponent. I mean, this thing is an absolute machine. It is one of the best burst ARs of all time. It is one of the shining spots of Chapter 3, Season 4, and I think that this is an underrated assault rifle. Moving on to number 6, that's going to be Sky's assault rifle from Chapter 2, Season 2. You guys knew it was going to be high up on this list. It is one of the best assault rifles we've ever seen. It is a mythic version of the Scar, right? The Scar was, at that time, really considered the best AR of all time, and you give it a mythic version, give it a better fire rate, give it more damage, a DPS of 220. Those are big-time numbers here, right? And, you know, when you get to this point in the list, you're all talking about weapons that could potentially be considered the best AR ever, so you'll see why this list is so hard for me to make. I know there's going to be a lot of disagreements in the comment section, but Sky's AR just falls out of the top 5, and there is a very specific reason for that. That's because its remastered version, Ice Spice's rifle, gets 1 spot higher than it. It has the exact same stats as Sky's, except for the fact that if you hit somebody with this weapon, you get the spicy pepper effect. Other than that, they are the exact same weapon. Of course, both of these weapons don't have scopes on them, which means that you've got to kind of be able to handle bloom. I think most people would prefer scoped ARs over those that don't. But with that being said, this thing is going to absolutely melt people if you can keep that bloom intact. Again, it's got the exact same damage numbers, same DPS, everything as Sky's AR. But since you do get that added bonus for hitting somebody, it's just going to get 1 spot higher than it. At number 4 is going to be Emma Frost's Striker Burst Assault Rifle. Now, this is an interesting one, right? Because a lot of you guys might even forget this weapon ever happened in Chapter 5, Season 4, because the mythic version of the Striker Burst AR was in Chapter 6, Season 2, and it was better, right? Because it was hit scan, but that weapon is not on this list today. And that's not to say that Emma Frost Striker Burst AR is a bad weapon. It is absolutely unbelievable. I genuinely think this is one of the best ARs in Fortnite history. I think it got so slept on because of the season that it was in, right? Chapter 5, Season 4 is probably not the best meta to have a burst assault rifle in, but when you pair this thing with her reveal medallion, this was one of the best dual weapon combos we've ever seen. I think this thing is undeniably good with a ton of damage. Its only downside is that it is a projectile weapon, but as you'll see coming up the pike here on this list, we've got some more projectile weapons to talk about. And one of those at number 3 is Machinist Combat AR from Chapter 5, Season 3. I honestly had no idea whether I wanted to put the Sky's AR here or the Machinist AR here, because by DPS, they're almost the exact same. They're only separated by 2 damage, right? The Machinist actually has a DPS of 2 lower than Sky's. But of course, with projectile weapons, it is a lot more difficult to hit your shots. But with this weapon, you also get a scope, whereas with Sky's assault rifle, you've got to battle bloom. So you can see why it was just so hard to rank these weapons on this list today, especially projectile versus non-projectile makes it so much more difficult. Unbelievable fire rate. This weapon really contains what I felt like was the big problem with the combat AR in the first place, which was the recoil. That red dot sight is massive. If you wanted to put Sky's AR here inside the top 3, you know, I think you could probably do that. But for me, I'm going with Machinist. But obviously, we've got 2 more weapons to talk about. These are Titan ARs. One of those weapons is Nisha's Striker AR from Chapter 5, Season 1. This thing is absolutely insane. When you start to get into the DPS of 230 plus for ARs, that is elite territory. Of course, this weapon has a little bit of a downside, and that is the fact that it has a little bit more recoil than your typical assault rifle on this list today. But you do get the red dot, you do get the suppressor. This was the best assault rifle in Chapter 5, and if it wasn't for the Reaper, I think this thing would be a lot more prevalent. This was an assault rifle in Chapter 5, Season 1 that if you saw on the ground, you had to take it, right? There is really no excuse to not take it. ARs just as a whole kind of struggled in that season, but this one was really good, and I feel like I never hear anybody talk about it. If you want to go straight by statistics, it is one of the best ARs we've ever seen, but it's not at the number 1 spot today. That spot was easily taken by the Foundation's MK7 assault rifle at my number 1 spot today. Now, of course, we've got to have a little bit of a conversation because in Chapter 4, Season 4, this weapon could be obtained through stealing it at, you know, those POIs. But again, that in and of itself is essentially a boss fight, right? You can only take 1 weapon from there, and then you've got to fight the boss anyways. But I can't make a list of every single boss assault rifle and not include the Foundation's MK7, right? This is probably the 2nd best AR of all time, I would say, behind the overclocked pulse rifle. In its prime, it's the best ever, right? But of course, it's gotten nerfed over and over again. They've given it more recoil, they've given it less damage, they've slowed down the fire rate just a little bit. But still, even with those nerfs, I think this is the best AR of all time. It is so accurate. In its prime, this thing was DPSing 270, right? That's insane considering a player only has 200 health. The MK7 as a whole is just so deadly, and you give it a mythic version, yeah, this thing was absolutely beefy. It was deadly. In my opinion, it is a clear number 1 spot on today's list. Alright folks, I hope you went on to enjoy that video. Again, let me know in the comment section what you thought. This was one of the hardest lists I have had to make in a long time, right? I spent like an hour just trying to look up stats and put this list together somewhat accurately. But of course, it is just my opinion, and your opinion will be totally different. I totally get that. If you did go on to enjoy this video, consider leaving it a like, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. As always, Peace.